So hi, we are Pure Yoga and we're going to be doing some strength and conditioning work. So there's going to be lots of planks, but they are the knee down planks because this is the mindful movement session. If you want to take the full version and take it into a stronger practice, then try and do the intermediate version. So this is beginners, and the other practice that's on the YouTube link is for intermediate. So let's go with beginners. What I want you to really think about in this practice, because it's going to be extremely slow, is the engagement of all around this core centre. So we're thinking about this space of the abdominals, the space of the obliques, which is around the side of the waist. We're thinking about that psoas muscle that travels from the ribs down towards that greater trochanter on the upper thigh. So it's our sit-up muscle. We're thinking about shoulder stability. So all the time moving slowly so we can really get that alignment. So I'm going to be saying things like squeeze the glutes, squeeze the thighs, squeeze the abdominals. So when I say tether the ribs and hips, it's like a micro movement that you can't necessarily see from the eye. It's just like the squeeze of that rib and hip towards each other, and sometimes thinking of the cross sections as well. So it's not like you crunch in like this, it's just that movement that you can feel within the body, but you can't necessarily see it on the outer of the body. We're going to be doing a few press-ups. So these press-ups in the mindful movement are going to be with the knees down. So when I ask you to do press-ups, I'm not asking you to do press-ups to the outside. I'm asking you to do the chaturanga style press-ups. So I will be cueing the turn of the crease of the elbows, as though you're taking the eye of the elbow forward, and then that allows those elbows to come into the ribs, to take that slow lower to the floor, and then you push back into the hands to lift that body back up. All the time keeping this core centre nice and strong. So when we lower, what I don't want to really see is that you start to lower the bum to press up. It's trying to keep that bum and that stability in the centre, to keep that torso in a nice long line, and then push back up through the hands. If that doesn't feel right and we take the push up, you can always just lower to the floor because we will be coming back down there, but I will cue all that anyway. So we're going to start in seated. So bringing the bums into the centre of the mat, facing your short edge. I'm going to face the long edge because I'm just going to be facing towards the camera for this section. Just find a comfortable space in a seat. It may be that you want to sit on a block. Now the blocks are quite useful in this practice because we're going to be using it to lift a leg up and over. So find either a block or a book. Just have that handy, or bring it underneath the bum. Place the hands on top of the thighs. Take a roll of the shoulders up towards the ears, back down towards the hips. Grow up tall through the crown. Get stability through those sit bones into the earth. And just feel that little rib and hip tether as you sit in seated. So that slight contraction of the abdominals to make you feel like you're drawing those rib and hips towards each other. But all the time staying tall through the spine, but not flaring through the ribs. Keep everything nice and strong in the middle of the body. Close the eyes just for a moment and just feel that sensation of strength as you sit in this seated pose, keeping everything engaged in the centre of the body. Just take a couple of deep breaths here. Start to send that breath nice and deeply into the belly. So as you breathe in, let that belly draw out like a balloon, so it blows up and brings that belly button away from the spine. Then as you breathe out, feel that contraction of the belly as you draw that belly back. So every exhale, really think about that contraction of the abdominals, and the inhale, the swelling up of the belly, sending that air into that space. Just take a couple of belly breaths here. The breath in, let the belly rise. Breath out, draw that belly back. All the time staying relaxed through the shoulders, tall through the crown, tall through the spine. open the eyes, we're just going to take a little rotation. So bringing your right hand onto your left knee, your left hand behind, just take a turn and twist to that left side of the room. Thinking about then bringing that right rib as though it's squeezing towards that left hip. Bring it through centre, take it to the other side. So this time the left hand to the right knee. Thinking about that left rib drawing towards that right hip. Taking that right hand behind and just rotating around. So again, try not to arch the back. Think about opposite rib drawing to opposite hip. Come back to the centre. Bringing your left hand to the floor, reaching your right hand to the ceiling. Just take a little flex over to that left side of the mat. Keep those breaths coming. Keep grounded through those sit bones. Then come back to the centre, bringing your right hand to the floor, left hand to lift and reach over to the opposite side. Bring that back to the middle. Just bring a hold onto the knees. Push that spine back. So we're bringing that chest in towards the body, the belly drawing back. So we're taking a flex into that spine. And then send it forward. So flare the ribs this time, lifting up through the chest, lifting up through the gaze, arching into that lower back, pushing those ribs towards me at the camera. And again, take it back, just send that body into flex, tuck the chin into the chest. And then lifting that chest, pushing the ribs forward, stretching up through the front side of the body. And then come back to centre. Slowly make your way onto your hands and knees, where we're going to start with our strength work. We've just moved our spine in lateral rotation, flexion and extension. So bringing the knees underneath the hips, hands underneath the shoulders, tops of the feet flat on the mat. Turn the creases of the elbows forward into the centre, so they're facing each other. Bring that belly back towards the spine and engage through the centre of the body. Take your right toes to the back of the mat, and without arching in that lower back, squeeze the right bum cheek as you lift up that right leg. Keep pushing into the top of the left foot. Push the right heel to the back of the room, right toes towards the shins. Try not to hyperextend those elbows, keep them soft. Keep that belly drawing back towards the spine. Keeping that right hip as level as you can with the left. Really squeezing that back chain of muscles on the right leg to keep that leg lifted. Into the glute medius on that right leg. Then bringing that right knee back down to the floor. Bring your weight this time into your right knee. Take your left toes to the back of the mat. And then lift that left leg, coming from the heel without arching into that lower back. So again, we're really working the glute maximus and we're working those hamstrings to lift that leg. We're pushing that left heel to the back of the room, left toes back towards the shins, softness through the elbows, working through those glutes, working through those abdominals. So try not to arch the back as you lift that leg. Keep that back in a nice long line. Then bringing that left knee back down to the floor. Just bring the hands a little further forward. Turn the creases of the elbows forward. Then start to lower the forearms towards the floor, keeping the bums high. Then push into the hands and lift back up. Still keeping the creases of the elbows facing forward. Start to lower those forearms back to the floor. The bum stays high. And then lift those elbows away from the mat, straightening through the arms. 2 more of these, just letting those elbows come down to the floor. And pushing into the hands and lifting those elbows away. 1 more time. Keep that back nice and straight. Don't arch into that lower back. Keep those abdominal contractions. Push into the hands, lift those elbows away. Bring those hands back underneath the shoulders. This time we're going to take the knees out to the side. So put your weight into your left knee. Keep that centre body nice and strong, rib and hip tether. And then raise that right leg up and out to the side, squeezing through the outside of that right hip. Lower that knee back to meet the left. Do that 4 more times on this side, lifting the right knee up as high as you can without that right hip lifting too high. And then bring it back down. Keep a nice long line through the back. 3 more. Raise that right knee and lower back to meet the left. 2 more. Raise that right leg. Keeping a nice strong line through that body and lower. 1 more on this side. Bringing your awareness to the space on the outside of the right hip as you lift that leg and squeeze that muscle. Bring that right knee back to where it came from. Put your weight into your right knee and then thinking about the awareness of that left hip, lift that left knee up and out to the side. Try and keep that torso nice and strong and stable. Bring that left leg back to the floor. Bring it back up and lower. That's 2. 3 more. That's 3. 2 more. Lift. Bring the awareness to the outside of that left hip. And lower. 1 more. Lift. And lower. So from this position, hands stay where they are and we step both feet back to that full plank position. Shoulders over the heel of the hands, belly's drawn back, squeeze the bum, squeeze the upper thighs. And then lift those hips to down dog without fussing with the hands and feet. Taking some strength through those shoulders. Let those shoulders come away from the ears. Bringing those heels as close to the floor. If you just want to have a paddle of these feet here, feel free to do so if the hamstrings are tight. But we're trying to concentrate on getting a little bit of length down that back chain of muscles. So holding it in this space just for another couple of breaths. 1 more breath. Then coming back through to a plank position, hold your full plank just for a couple of breaths. Squeeze the bum, the belly back, push into those hands, chest pushing away from the floor and pushing that chest cavity into that space between the shoulders. Then drop down the knees and untuck the toes. Turn the creases of the elbows forward. Keep the body strong in the centre. Lower that body down. And then push into those hands and raise that body back up, really strengthening through those upper arms. This time, as you lower down, we just hold it in a hover for a breath. And then release that chest to the floor, push into the hands, lift up the chest, little baby cobra. Then release that chest back down, tuck under with those toes. Bring those chests back to the thighs, keeping that centre support in the body. Seat towards the feet. Then push into the hands, push into the feet as you lift up the hips back to your down dog. Trying to encourage those heels down towards the floor. Feet hip width apart, hands shoulder width apart. Relaxing them shoulders away from the ears. Tethering those ribs and hips, that little micro movement internally, as though you're drawing that belly back. 1 more breath in down dog. And then coming back down onto the knees, untuck the toes. Bring the heel of the hands underneath the shoulders. Draw the belly back. This time we're going to include the arms. So put your weight into your left hand, bring your right hand forward, bicep towards the ear. Take your left foot back to the back of the mat. Stabilise into that left hand, soften that left elbow. Then raise that left leg up towards hip height without arching in the back. Think about switching on the muscles in the shoulder to raise that right hand as far as you can up by the side of that right ear. Reaching forward with the right fingertips, back with the left heel, squeezing the belly, squeezing the glute on that left leg to lift that leg level with that hip. Holding it here just for a few more breaths. Strong centre. Support through that left hand, right knee and the top of the right foot. Then bring your right hand down, your left knee down. Put your weight this time into your right hand. Reach your left hand forward, soften the right elbow. Take your right toes to the back of the mat, centre support, tether those ribs and hips. Then lift that right leg up to hip height without arching into that lower back. Keep lifting that belly away from the floor. Keep pushing that chest into that space between the shoulder blades. Right heel pushing back, right toes back to the shins, left fingertips coming forward. Really stretching through the left side of the body, stretching through the right side of the body. Lifting that left arm maybe a little higher beside that ear on the left side. One more breath here. Release the left hand down, right knee down. Step both feet back to a plank position. Hold it in plank for a breath. And then lift up those hips and squeeze those heels back, holding in down dog, stretching that back chain of muscles, strengthening through the shoulders. Then come forward slowly into a plank position. Without moving the feet, drop the knees, make sure the shoulders are over the heel of the hands. Untuck the toes, turn the creases of the elbows forward, and slowly with a straight body, come just to hover off the mat. And then push into those hands and lift that chest away from the floor, taking that drop knee plank lower. And then slowly bring that body down, again to a hover without collapsing the bum down and the hips to the floor. And then release everything down to the mat. Push into the hands and lift up through the chest. Release that chest back down, tuck under with the toes. Bring that chest back to the thighs, strong centre of the body. Seat back to the feet. Then push into the hands, push into the feet and lift up the hips. Squeeze those heels back. Coming back forward to a plank position. Hold it in plank just for a few breaths. Soften the elbows, push into the hands, squeeze the bum, squeeze the belly back. Then bringing the knees back underneath the hips. Heel of the hands underneath the shoulders. This time we're taking that right knee out and holding it out for a few breaths without lifting and lowering. Weight comes into your left knee. Raise that right knee out to the side and up as much as you can to hip height. Hold it in that space for the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lower back to the floor. Lift up, back to hip height. Taking 5 more, lower and less. That's 3 more. 2 more. And 1 more. And release that right knee back down. Bring your weight into your right knee. Lift your left knee up to hip height and hold it here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift and lower. That's 1. 4 more. 2. Nice and slowly, squeezing the outside of that left hip. 3, 4, 1 more, and 5. Bring that left knee back to meet the right. Widen the knees, bring the big toes together, sit bones to the heels, reach forward with the hands, sink the chest and forehead to the mat, and just take a couple of moments in child's pose. Just to release off through those hips from that work you've been doing on the outside of those glutes and those hip rotators. Choice can be to take on a little water here. The slower we make the movements, the more we're controlling that body, getting better functional movement for when we move through faster flows. 1 more breath in this space. Then coming back up onto the hands and knees. Knees under the hips, step both feet back to a plank. Hold it in plank for a few breaths, squeezing the bum, the belly, pushing the chest away from the floor. Then lifting the hips, squeezing those heels back. Come forward, back to a plank position. Drop down the knees without moving the feet, just untucking the toes. Turn the creases of the elbows forward. Let those elbows graze the ribs as you come to a lower and a hover. Then push into those hands and lift that chest back away from the floor. Bring it back down to a hover and just hold it in hover for a breath. And then release that body down to the floor. Push into the hands, lift up the chest, maybe come a little higher this time. Then release that chest back down, tuck under with the toes. Bring the chest back to those thighs. Seat towards the feet. Push into the hands, push into the feet, lift up the hips and squeeze those heels back. Coming back down onto your knees. Untuck the toes, heel of the hands under the shoulders. Stepping your right toes back, then lifting your right leg up to hip height without arching into the lower back. On your breath out, bring that right knee towards that right elbow. Try not to move too much in the back, keep that centre support, then straighten that leg back out. Don't arch the lower back. Right knee to the right elbow, squeeze that hip flexor, bring it in towards the body as much as you can, then straighten back out, push that right heel away, keep that torso nice and strong in the centre. One more time, squeeze that right knee in towards that upper arm or elbow, and then straighten that leg back out without arching into that lower back. Bring that right knee back down, put your weight into your right leg, reach the left toes to the back of the mat, lift that left leg up to hip height without arching into the lower spine, soften the elbows, push those hands into the floor. Bring that left knee to the left elbow or left upper arm, and then straighten back out. Centre support. Bring that left knee to left elbow, squeeze, and then straighten back out. Left knee, left elbow, and squeeze. Just take one more here, and then straighten back out. Bring that left knee down to meet the right. Step both feet back into a plank position. Hold it in plank, feet hip width apart, hands shoulder width apart, then raise the hips back to down dog. Try not to arch into the back, really feel like that lower back isn't arching and those ribs and hips are tethered. Space between the shoulders and the ears. Come back forward to plank on your inhale and drop down with the knees. Take an untuck of the toes. Turn the creases of the elbows slowly lower to a hover off the floor. Then push into the hands, bring that chest back up. Bring it back to a hover, hold it in hover for a breath. Then release that chest down, untuck those toes, push into the hands, lift the chest up a little higher. Then release that chest back down, tuck under with the toes. Chest comes back towards those thighs. Push into the hands, push into the feet, lift up the hips, find your down dog. Hold it there for a couple of breaths. Then coming down onto the knees. Turn your right foot off the mat. Bring your weight onto your right side. Bring your left hand onto your left hip. So that right knee dropped is supporting the pose. Soften the elbow of the right hand. And we're going to lift and lower that left leg, but we're trying to keep those hips pushed forward. As you breathe in, lift up to hip height and lower. 4 more. Breath in, lifts and lower. 3 more. Breath in, lift and lower. Don't let the hips drop back. Keep them in line with that right knee. Lift and lower. 1 more time. Lift and lower. Bring that left hand down. Right foot back to meet the left. Just hold it in plank for a breath. And then lift those hips. Squeeze those heels back. Finding down dog for a breath. Your next breath in, come forward to a plank position. Drop down with the knees without fussing with the feet. Untuck the toes, turn the creases of the elbows. Lower to a hover. Keep that core centre engaged in the middle. Push into those hands, lift that chest away. And then release down again to a lower. Don't let those bums sink. Let everything come to a long line. And then let the body come down to the floor. Push into the hands and lift up the chest. Release that chest back down. Tuck under with the toes. Bring those chests back towards those thighs. Push into the hands, push into the feet, lift up the hips. Squeeze those heels back, holding it in down dog just for a breath. Then bringing yourself back onto your knees. Turn your left foot this time off the mat. Bring your weight onto that left side, right hand onto the right hip. Push those hips towards that right side of the mat. We're going to lift and lower with the right leg. Breath in, lift, squeeze in this glute on the outside of the right hip and lower. And lift. And lower. Soften that left elbow, don't hyperextend. Lift. And lower. Keep those right toes facing towards that right side of the room. Lift. And lower. Keep everything stable in the centre of the body. One more lift. And lower. Bring your right hand down. Step your left foot back to meet the right. Find plank position. And then slowly lift the hips back to down dog just for a breath. Come forward then to a plank. Drop down with the knees. Untuck the toes. Turn the creases of the elbows forward. Slowly lower to a hover. Elbows grazing the ribs. Push into the hands. Lift up the chest. Then lower again all the way just to a hover for a breath. Then release the chest down. Push into the hands. Lift up the chest. Release the chest back down. Tuck under the toes. Bring those chests back towards those thighs. Push into the hands, push into the feet and lift up the hips and squeeze those heels back. Taking a breath in down dog. Then coming back onto the knees. Again, turn your right foot off the mat. Bring your weight onto your right side body. Reach forward with your left hand. Lift your left leg away from the floor. We're going to go in flex and extension, elbow to knee. Breath out, squeeze everything in. Breath in, lengthen. 4 more. Breath out, squeeze that hip flexor in. Breath out, lengthen. 3 more. Breath in, squeeze. Breath out, lengthen. 2 more. Breath in, squeeze. Breath out, lengthen. 1 more. Breath in, squeeze. Keep that belly tight. Breath out, lengthen. Bring your left hand down. Your left foot to the back. Your right foot to the back. Hold it in plank. Squeeze the bum, the belly, the glutes. Lift the hips. Squeeze the heels back. Holding in down dog just for a breath. Come back forward to a plank position. Drop down with the knees without fussing with the feet. Untuck the toes. Turn the creases of the elbows. Come down just to a hover. Elbows grazing the ribs. Then really push into the hands and lift the chest away from the floor. Release down to a hover just for a breath. And then release that chest down. Push into the hands, lift up with the chest, squeeze the shoulders back. Release the chest back down. Tuck under with the toes. Push into the hands, keep the centre body stable. As you bring the seat back to the feet, chest to thighs, push into the hands, push into the feet. Lift up the hips, squeeze the heels back. Relax through the neck if you're holding that tension there. Come back forward onto your knees. Turning your left foot off the mat. Coming onto that left hand, sending your right foot to the back of the mat. Reaching your right hand to the front of the mat. Stabilise on this side plank first, then lift that right leg up to hip height. Squeeze elbow to knee on the out breath. In breath, lengthen. 4 more. Squeeze in, take it slow. And out. 3 more. In. And out. 2 more. In. And out. 1 more. In. And out. Bring your right hand down, right toes to the back of the mat, left toes to meet the right. Lift up the hips. Squeeze those heels back. Hold it for a breath in down dog. Your next breath in, forward to a plank. Then just drop down the knees, untuck the toes, turn the creases of the elbows forward. Slowly let that body come down all the way to the floor and then push back up. And release back down. Just hover in that space for a breath. Release the chest down. Push into the hands. Lift up the chest. Release the chest back down. Tuck under with the toes. Bring those chests back to the thighs. Keep those bellies drawn back as you transition. Lift up the hips. Squeeze the heels back. Coming down then onto the knees. Separate the knees as wide as the mat. Bring the big toes together. Seat towards the feet. Choice here to take on maybe some water if you wish. Or just find yourself that restorative breath. The body probably feels a little bit hot from doing all those slow transitions and engaging those muscles. So the next side plank we're going to be doing will be hip, lower and lifts. So we'll make our way back in a moment through tabletop, through plank and back into down dog. So another breath here, or taking on a little more water, small sips and often a key. Then making your way back to your down dog place, coming through tabletop first, stepping both feet back to a plank, lifting the hips, feet hip width apart, hands shoulder width apart, squeezing those chests back to the thighs, relaxing through the shoulders, lengthening through the arms. Come back forward to a plank position, just hold it in plank just for a breath. Then dropping down with your right knee, turn your right foot off the mat, your left foot to the back of the mat, step your right hand a little further forward, left hand onto the hip of the left side. So in this place we're going to take hip drops. So on your out breath, let that right hip come down as close to the floor as you can. And on your in breath, lift that left hip up. Drop that right hip down. Lift that left hip up, really using the oblique strength. Try not to arch the lower back. Drop that right hip down. Lift that left hip up. We have 2 more on this side. Drop that right hip down. Lift that left hip up. 1 more, drop the right hip down. Lift that left hip up. Bring it back to centre. Bring your left hand down. Left toes to the back of the mat. Bring your right hand under your shoulder. Right toes meet the left. Hold it in plank for a breath. Then lift the hips. Squeeze those heels back into down dog. Then come back forward to a plank position. Drop down the knees, untuck the toes, turn the creases of the elbows forward. Elbows graze the ribs as you lower towards the floor. Push into those hands, lift that chest away from the mat. Slowly lower back down to a hover. Then bring the chest to the floor, push into the hands, lift up the chest. Release the chest back down, tuck under with the toes. The chest comes back towards the thighs. Push into the hands, push into the feet, lift up the hips. Squeeze those heels back. Hold it in down dog just for a breath. Then bring yourself back onto the knees. Your left foot comes just slightly off the mat. We'll bring the weight into the left hand. Reach your left hand a little further forward. Right hand comes onto the hip. Then we're taking those lower and lifts of that left and right hip. On your breath out, lower the left hip as close to the floor as you can. And on your in-breath, lift that right hip back up. Lower the left hip. Lift up with the right hip. Lower the left hip. Lift up with the right hip. 2 more, lower the left. Lift up through the right. 1 more, lower the left. Lift up through the right. Bring it back to the centre. Right hand to the floor. Left hand comes back to meet the right. Step the left foot back to meet the right foot. Lift the hips. Squeeze the heels back. Holding it in down dog just for a breath. Then taking that flow of a vinyasa of controlled movement. Forward to plank on that inhale. Drop down the knees, untuck the toes, turn the creases of the elbows, lower with a straight torso, just to off the floor. Push into the hands, lift that chest away. Then lower again to the floor, keep those elbows grazing the ribs. Push into the hands and lift up through the chest. Release that chest back down, tuck under with the toes. Bring the chest back towards those thighs. Push into the hands, push into the feet, lift up the hips. Squeeze those heels back. Letting go with the head. Let it just dangle in between those arms. Trying to encourage those heels as close towards the mat as you can. That rib and hip tethering down dog. Just holding it here for a breath. Then making your way into a seat. Swinging the legs around to the front of the mat. So this is where we're going to be taking some movement for the hip flexors. So I am going to face the front of the mat here, but if you stay facing your short edge of the mat, this is where a block is going to come in handy. It has 3 heights. You have the smallest, middle, higher. Find the best height for you and place that block in the centre of the legs. Make sure the flesh is removed from underneath your sit bones. So you are nice and tall through the spine, relax through the shoulders, growing up through the crown of the head. So I'm going to mirror image you. So just move your right leg over to the side and your left leg in towards that block. Hands can be either on fingertips just to support the back, but try not to lean backwards. Keep that spine nice and tall. So the aim is to lift this left leg up slowly and lower it to the inside of the block. So bringing that leg up, bringing it across and lowering it to the other side. And again, lift that leg, take it over and back to the other side. Working this psoas muscle, lift, bring it over, lower. Just finding anything that you can lift your leg over. It doesn't have to be a block, it can be a weight. But try not to swing through the torso. So the torso is staying nice and tall, nice and straight back. Slow movement with that leg. Taking it from one side to the other and taking that awareness to this space here between the ribs and the top of the thigh. Just keep lifting and lowering. I'm not sure how many I'm on here, but I would suggest 10. So 1 over, 1 back is 1. And you may feel the upper part of the thigh gets a little bit of cramp. Just stop if you get cramp, give that muscle a squeeze, and then continue lifting and lowering. So I'm going to take it that I've done 10 when I take it back. And then take that leg out to the side, bring your right leg in to the side of the block, and we do 10 lift and lowers on this side. So breath in, lift and lower, lift and lower. So that's 1, lift, lower, lift and lower. If it's easier to place your back up against a wall to keep it stable, feel free to do so. And lower, that's 4. And 5. And 6. Notice my torso isn't moving too much. And 7. And 8. Remember that block doesn't need to be as high as this if this is a bit of a struggle. 9. 1 more on this side. And 10. Just give those legs a little paddle. Remove that block. I'm just going to turn myself around so you can see the side profile of the next pose. So the next pose is bringing the hands behind the back, turning the fingertips out. So what I'm planning on doing here is lifting my body up into a reverse tabletop. So bringing the feet in towards you, knees are bent, hip width apart. We push into the hands here. As you push those hips up towards the ceiling to come into that space of tabletop, nice long line from the shoulders to the knees. Pushing into the big toes, pushing into the little toes. Pushing that chest up high, squeezing the bum to lift those hips as high as you can. Gazing either up towards the ceiling or out in front of you. Just supporting that neck wherever you are. Holding it here for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly let those bums come down to the floor. And just bring the hands away from the mat. Just give those hands a shake. Maybe a little rotation through those wrists. So again, we're going to take it into that space. So bring those hands behind. Fingertips pointing out. Push into those hands. Push into those feet. Lift up the hips, finding that tabletop position. Holding it here for 5. 4, squeeze the bum. 3, 2, 1, and slowly lower the bum back to the mat. Take the hands away from the floor, maybe give a little rotation through the wrists. We're going to take it one more time into that position, so bringing the hands again behind the back, fingers pointing out. Push the feet into the mat, squeeze the bum as you lift those hips up to that tabletop position again. Holding it here for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Slowly let those hips come back down to the floor. Straighten out the legs. Give those wrists a little rotation, maybe a little shake of the arms. We're going to take it nice and slowly now to the floor, arms out in front of you, heels pushing away, toes back to the shins. Make sure you've got the space behind you as you slowly and mindfully make your way down to the mat, squeezing that belly back. Feeling each vertebra come down one at a time, particularly through that lower back, into that thoracic part of the spine, up into that cervical part of the spine. Bring the hands down by the sides of the body. Take a bend into both knees. Take your right ankle onto the top of the left knee and turn that knee out to the side. So we're going to go back to strengthening this hip flexor on the left side. So bringing your right toes back to the shins, as you then lift that left leg away from the floor without using the hands, using the muscles on that inner part of that hip flexor, that psoas muscle, to squeeze that foot as close as you can in towards the body. Holding it in this position, getting an external rotation of the right hip, a compression of the left hip flexor, really working the muscles in the front of that left hip. Relax the shoulders, push them in towards the mat. Relax through the arms, relax through the forehead and the jaw. Try not to hold any tension in that upper part of the body. Just use the energy into that left hip flexor. And then without holding onto the leg, lift that left heel up, point that left heel to the ceiling, left toes back to the shins, using the upper thigh muscle to straighten that left leg. Breathing nice and easy all the time, trying to squeeze that left leg a little closer, putting the pressure into that outside ankle of the right foot, but that right foot resists that leg from coming any closer. Using nothing but muscle strength, no external help to draw that left leg in. Hold it here just for one more breath. Then release that left foot to the floor, right foot to meet the left. Then bringing that left ankle onto the top of the right thigh. Let the left knee turn out, left toes back towards the shins. And then raise that right foot away from the floor. You're resisting with that left foot from that right knee being pushed in any closer. So you're really engaging now the hip flexor on that right leg. Really try and squeeze that knee in a little closer. You're feeling a stretch through this piriformis muscle on that left hip, but an external rotation of that left hip also. Keep squeezing that right knee in. Keep pushing those shoulders into the mat. Relax the jaw, the forehead. Take any energy out of the upper body and send it into the lower body. Then send that right heel to point up to the ceiling, right toes back to the shins. Engage the upper thigh on the right leg to feel that leg straightening on that right side. Keep squeezing those left toes back to the left shin. So you're activating the front tibialis muscle on that right shin to bring those toes back. Stretching through the Achilles, the calves, the hamstrings. All the time trying to bring that right leg as close into the body, resisting with that left foot. Holding it here just for a few more breaths. You may start to feel the fatigue in the hip flexor on that right leg. Keep relaxing the shoulders, the jaw, the forehead. Then take a bend back into that right leg. Bring the right foot back to the floor. Left foot to meet the right. We're going to stretch out the hip flexors, engage the glutes by taking ourselves up into a bridge position. So pushing into the feet, slowly raising those hips, bringing them up into an extension through the back of the body. Chest comes towards the chin, but create a little space through the back of the neck. Squeeze the bum, feel like you're squeezing those inner adductors on the inside of those thighs, as though you're squeezing a beach ball in between those knees. Squeeze those bums a little harder, push those feet into the mat a little firmer, holding it in bridge position for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then slowly let those bums come back down to the mat. Arms out to a T shape or cactus arms. Knees and ankles come together. Just windscreen wipe those legs from one side over to the other side. Back through centre. Keep them going one side to another without holding. Just getting into that lower back. The next time you come to your right side, just let everything drop towards the floor. Left shoulder stays on the mat. Bring your right foot from underneath the left foot. Maybe bring your right outside ankle onto the top of that left knee, just to encourage that twist a little deeper. maybe gazing towards that left hand. Then bringing your right foot underneath that left foot back to where it came from. Bring the knees back into the centre. Just make sure the neutralisation of the spine first. Then take the knees over to your left side, the gaze to your right side, right shoulder stays grounded. And maybe bring that left foot from underneath that right leg, bringing your left foot onto the top of that right knee, just to encourage that down. Using nice, easy breaths in this position. Feeling that stretch through those hips. Then bringing those knees back to the centre by unhooking that left foot. Bring the knees into the chest, just give those knees a squeeze. And then releasing those legs long to the ends of the mat, bringing them out mat width apart, making your way into relaxation, turning the palms up, letting the fingers gently curl, maybe taking the arch out of the lower back by arching that tailbone under. Maybe have a little rock of those hips from side to side. Maybe a turn of the head in one direction. Bringing it back through centre, over to the other side, back to the middle. Find that comfortable space at the back of the head. Close the eyes, let the tongue drop away from the roof of the mouth and the lips gently part. Maybe let those shoulders come away from the ears a little more, sending them towards the hips. And just take a few moments in relaxation, just to consolidate everything you've just done. The strength work for the shoulders, the core, the glutes, the thighs. Knowing that you've worked those hip flexors, the outside of the hips. Full core support in the middle of the body. Using these thoughts of movement through the next month of practice. Thinking of that tether of the ribs and the hips, the squeeze of the belly back to support through the centre of the body, the squeeze of the bum, the support of the shoulders by pushing the chest back when you're in plank position. All those cues taking you through October's month of practices. If you wish to stay in relaxation for a little longer, maybe pause me now. If you're coming with me, maybe start to wiggle those fingers and those toes. Maybe take a little rotation through those ankles, through those wrists. If you wish to take a full body stretch, stretching the hands up and over the head, stretching through the fingers, the toes, maybe taking an arch into the lower back, maybe taking a yawn. And then bringing the hands back up and over, bringing the knees in towards the chest, just maybe having a little rock of that body from side to side, just massaging that spine, thanking it for practice. Then taking a hold of the creases of the knees, just rocking up and down that spine a couple of times, up to seated once, back down, up to seated twice, back down. This time when you arrive in seated, find a comfortable seated position, crossed legs or on the knees. Bring the hands to the thighs, eyes gently closed. Take a slight bow through the head and lift up through the spine. Take a breath in, raise the hands up to the ceiling, palms come together at the top. Then bring the hands to the chest, soft gaze to the floor.
Have peace in your thoughts, have peace in your words, have peace in your hearts. From my heart to yours. Namaste.